at the Mountains of Madness, Modern Rewrite, a modern language retelling based on HP Lovecraft's public domain novella, 1936. Part 1, The Warning and the Plan. I didn't want to speak up, but I had no choice. I warned the expedition to stay away from Antarctica, but they refused to listen, so now I have to explain why. I hate that I must lay out my reasons for opposing this grand fossil hunt with its drilling and ice melt schemes. People will doubt the facts as I reveal them. They'll call the incredible impossible. Yet if I cut the parts that sound outrageous, nothing would remain of the truth. We withheld photographs, standard and aerial, that are brutally clear. They'll help my case, but even those will be called fakes. The ink drawings will be mocked too, despite the technique any art expert should find unsettling. In the end, I can only hope a few independent scientific leaders will judge the evidence on its own awful merits, or at least in the light of ancient, baffling myths, and have enough influence to stop the rest of the world from rushing into that region of mountains of madness. We're not famous experts. Men like me, unknowns from a small university, rarely change people's minds on something this bizarre and controversial. Worse than that, none of us were strict specialists in what ultimately mattered most. I'm a geologist. The only reason I led the Miskatonic University expedition was to collect deep-core rock and soil from across the Antarctic with a breakthrough drill designed by Professor Frank H. Pabody. We wanted to test it along known routes to reach layers ordinary methods couldn't. The whole rig, steel head, jointed rods, gasoline motor, collapsible derrick, dynamite kit, debris auger, and 5-inch piping rated to 1,000 feet, fit on 3 dog sleds thanks to a clever aluminum alloy. We had 4 Dornier aircraft customized for high-altitude flight on the plateau, with fuel warmers and quick-start systems Pabody devised. From a base at the ice barrier, we could fly inland, moving camps by air and relying on dog teams for the rest. The plan was ambitious but simple. Cover as much territory as one Antarctic season would allow, longer if we had to, focusing on ranges and plateaux south of the Ross Sea. With frequent aircraft relocations spanning geologically meaningful distances, we expected an unprecedented haul, especially Precambrian material. We knew Antarctica was once temperate, even tropical, with thriving plants and animals. Today, only lichens, marine life, arachnids, and the penguins at the fringe survive. We hope to expand that knowledge in variety, accuracy, and detail. If a bore revealed fossils, we'd widen the hole with blasting to bring up samples in good condition. We drilled only on exposed slopes and ridges. Lower ground is buried under a mile or more of ice, and we couldn't waste depth on glacier. Pabody had also rigged copper electrodes that, with current from a gasoline dynamo, could melt limited ice areas. But that was experimental. It's that melting method the coming Starkweather Moor expedition plans to use, despite our warnings after we returned. The public followed us through wireless bulletins to the Arkham Advertiser and the Associated Press, and later through Pabody's and my articles. We were 4 university men: Pabody, engineering; Lake, biology; Atwood, physics and meteorology; and me, geology and nominal command, plus 16 assistants, 7 grad students and 9 mechanics. 12 could pilot aircraft, 10 of those were radio operators. 8 plus Pabody, Atwood, and I could navigate by compass and sextant. Our 2 ships, wooden ex-whalers reinforced for ice, were fully crewed by veterans. We loaded everything in Boston and sailed September 2nd, 1930, stopping at Samoa and Hobart for final supplies. None of us had been to the poles. We leaned on our captains, J.B. Douglas for the Arkham and Georg Thorfinson for the Miskatonic. At 62 degrees south, we saw our first tabular icebergs. We crossed the circle, October 20th. Field ice bothered us, but we pushed through to open water at 67 degrees south, 175 degrees east. A strong land blink, and then the Admiralty Range filled the horizon. We entered McMurdo Sound and lay off the coast in the lee of smoking Erebus, 12,700 feet, with White Terror at 10,900 beyond. Penguins squawked and fat seals slid across drifting ice. Just after midnight on the 9th, we made a difficult landing on Ross Island and set up a provisional camp below Erebus's slope, with Arkham as headquarters. We unloaded drills, dogs, sledges, tents, provisions, gasoline tanks, an experimental ice melter, cameras, aircraft parts, and portable radios able to reach the ship's set from anywhere we would likely go. We hoped to finish in a single summer. If not, we'd winter on Arkham and send Miskatonic north before the freeze to fetch the next season's supplies. We climbed Erebus, drilled Ross Island rock, hauled sledges up the barrier, and assembled 5 large aircraft atop the snow shelf. The land party, 20 men and 55 Alaskan dogs, stayed healthy. Temperatures hovered near or above zero. The barrier camp became a cache for fuel, provisions, dynamite, and spares. 4 planes were enough for exploration. The 5th stayed with a pilot and 2 shipmen at the cache as backup. We planned later shuttles to a second base, 600 to 700 miles south, on the high plateau beyond Beardmore Glacier. On November 21st, we made a breath-holding 4-hour flight over shelf ice, vast peaks rising to the west, silence broken only by engine roar. Radio compasses carried us through one opaque fog. When the rise appeared between 83 degrees and 84 degrees south, we knew we'd hit Beardmore, the largest valley glacier on Earth. The frozen sea gave way to a mountainous coast. We were entering the white, eon-dead world of the ultimate south. We saw Mount Nansen tower nearly 15,000 feet. We established our southern base above the glacier at 86 degrees, 7 minutes south, 174 degrees, 23 minutes east, and drilled and blasted rapidly. Pabody and 2 grad students, Gedney and Carroll, climbed Nansen. Experimental drillings found solid ground only 12 feet down. We brought up Precambrian granites and beacon sandstones that matched most of the continent westward. The parts east below South America differed, then thought separate, a theory later disproved. In sandstones, we found fascinating fossils, ferns, seaweeds, trilobites, crinoids, mollusks, significant for the region's primordial story. Then Lake found a triangular, striated marking pieced from 3 slate fragments near the Queen Alexandra Range. As a biologist, he was puzzled. To my eye, it resembled ripple marks distorted by pressure. I saw no reason for alarm. On January 6, 1931, Lake Pabody Daniels, 6 students, 4 mechanics, and I flew directly over the South Pole in 2 planes, once forced down by a sudden wind that, thankfully, didn't become a full storm. Several reconnaissance flights disappointed us, though we saw magnificent polar mirages. Cloudy days made flying rough. Snow and sky merged into an opalescent void with no horizon. We decided to push 500 miles east with all 4 planes and set up a sub-base on what we believed, wrongly, was a smaller continental division. Comparative geology demanded it. Our health held. It was midsummer. If we moved smartly, we might finish by March and avoid the long Antarctic night. A few savage windstorms rushed at us from the west, but Atwood's snow-block windbreaks and reinforced shelters saved us. Our luck felt uncanny. The outside world knew our program, and heard of Lake's stubborn insistence on a northwest trip before shifting east. He obsessed over that triangular striation, reading contradictions in natural history that gnawed at him. He demanded more borings and blasts in the western formation. He was convinced the marking was the print of a bulky, unknown organism of strangely advanced evolution, despite the rock's ancient date. Those fragments with their marks were 500 million to a billion years old. Part 2. The Cavern and the Elder Ones. Public interest spiked as our wireless dispatches announced Lake's push into never-touched territory northwest of the base. We didn't mention his bolder ambition, rewriting biology and geology, but his preliminary run had already turned up Archean slate rich with fossil markings. Even I was impressed, though I still thought pausing our eastward move for a full-scale detour was risky. I let Lake go, but stayed behind with Pabodie and 5 men to finalize the eastward plan. Lake's party sent their own shortwave reports, picked up at our southern base and by Arkham, then relayed outward. They began before dawn on January 22nd and came fast. The first shaft opened into Comanchean limestone. A heavy blast revealed a groundwater-worn cavern layer with faint air, stalactites, and a passage choked by shells and bones, Cretaceous, Eocene, and others, washed in over ages from jungles of tree ferns and forests of cycads and palms. Mixed into the loose detritus were fossils from much older eras, hinting at a bizarre local continuity. Then Fowler found triangular striated prints in Comanchean fragments, matching the marks in Archean slate. The source had endured across 600+ million years, a greenish 5-pointed soapstone with dot groups turned up. The dogs hated it. At 10:15 p.m. came the find that changed everything. Watkins and Orendorff uncovered a barrel-shaped life form, 6 feet long, 5 ridges-like staves, membranous wings folded in the furrows, equatorial arms branching like crinoids into 25 tendrils per stalk. Nearby lay 13 more, 8 nearly perfect, each with a bulb neck bearing a 5-pointed starfish head, cilia, eye tubes, mouth tubes, and a counterpart at the base with 4-foot muscular arms ending in 5-veined paddles, the pseudo-feet responsible for ancient prints. The fabric was infinitely tough yet flexible. The dogs went berserk if brought near them. Lake dissected a damaged specimen. Inside, organs were intact after tens of millions of years. A thick, dark green fluid served circulatory roles. Multiple respiratory pathways implied amphibious life and airless hibernation capacity. Vocal organs suggested musical piping across a wide range. The nervous system was intricate, with a 5-lobed brain and probable extra senses. Reproduction appeared spore-based, with spore cases at wingtips. Half joking, half awed, Lake dubbed them the Elder Ones. He covered the specimen, threw a spare tent over the rest against sun and scent, and raised snow walls higher, the gale intensifying. We agreed to reconnect at 10 in the morning. If wind eased, he'd send a plane for us. I told Arkham to tone down the day's revelations for the outside world until we had more proof. Part 3. The Rescue Flight and the Ruined Camp. Morning brought silence. Electrical disturbance blocked contact with Lake. Arkham also failed to reach him. A savage wind hit our base, then eased. Concern turned to alarm. I ordered the 5th plane at the McMurdo cache to fly in with Sherman and sailors Gunnarsson and Larson. They arrived around midnight. We loaded fuel, gear, one sled, 7 dogs, radio, and supplies for an immediate investigative flight. January 25th, 7:15 a.m., clear air, navigation straightforward. Twice we fought upper air gales. We spotted the site of Lake's mid-journey shaft and those rolling snow cylinders earlier explorers had noted. Larson first sighted the jagged line of witch-like cones and pinnacles. As we closed, the skyline showed cube-like clinging structures on black, snow-bare summits, echoing Lake's last reports. A polar mirage briefly painted a cyclopean city across the zenith, then dissolved. We landed near the left-hand dark blot we took for the camp. The wind had wrecked the place, shelters smashed, a derrick shaken to pieces, exposed metal burnished by ice blast, tents flattened, tracks obliterated. 11 men were dead. Gedney was missing. All dogs were dead or missing, the corral broken from within. 3 sledges were gone. None of the 8 perfect elder ones remained. 6 imperfect specimens had been insanely buried upright in 9-foot snow graves, each topped by a 5-pointed mound punctured with dot clusters, matching the dot groups on green soapstones. Inside the lab tent, the dissecting table wasn't as Lake left it. Carefully but crudely arranged were human and canine parts. 1 man, identity suppressed, and 1 dog, dissected using Lake's instruments. Missing, but seemingly cleaned. A gasoline stove was gone. Around it lay a litter of matches. We buried the man with the others, the dog with the dogs. Many mechanical items, aircraft, drills, instruments, looked disordered or curiously investigated. Dogs had shown hostile uneasiness, not only near the biological specimens, but also near green soapstones and altered gear. Salt from provision chests had been sprinkled around bodies, as if by a butcher. Tent cloths and fursuits bore odd slashes, like clumsy attempts at adaptation. Tin cans were pried open in improbable ways. Matches were strewn intact or spent throughout. We sent a guarded bulletin. A windstorm disaster had wiped out Lake's party, bodies unsuitable for transport, dogs all dead, equipment damaged, 1 man missing. We held back the rest to prevent madness rumors. Part 4. Over the pass to the Elder City. The next day, only a radically lightened plane could cross a range of such height that limited the scouting to Danforth and me. We targeted the lowest pass, about 23 to 24,000 feet, windows open for visibility in the thin, bitter air, dressed in our heaviest furs. The skyline showed uncanny regularities, fragments like perfect cubes clinging to peaks, and square or semicircular cave mouths cut into snow-free black summits. The wind in the pass piped, eerily musical, the notes sweeping in and out of cavern mouths. We topped 23,570 feet and stared out across the momentous divide. Beyond the pass stretched a tempest-scarred superplateau at roughly 20,000 feet, its thin glacial veneer only 40 to 50 feet thick. Out of this sheet rose an almost endless labyrinth of regular stone masses, walls, towers, cylinders, terraces, truncated cones, pyramids, linked by tubular bridges far above the ground. Many walls stood 10 to 150 feet high. Windows with petrified wooden shutters and arched doors proved the place was an artificial megalopolis, unimaginably ancient and still legible in plan. We found a smooth snowfield on the foothills, landed, and moved down gradient into the city. Part 5. The Elder City Revealed. The first structure we touched was a 5-pointed star rampart, roughly 300 feet across and 10 to 11 feet high, built of Jurassic sandstone. Arched loopholes spaced symmetrically at points, and interior angles pierced the wall. Faint banded carvings marked the inner faces. 10 or 15 rods farther, the labyrinth began in earnest. Roofless towers and deep canyons formed by overhanging masonry and collapsed bridges. Under transparent patches of ice, we glimpsed submerged windows, still tightly shuttered, suggesting the city had been deliberately closed before glaciation crystallized the lower levels. Inside, a long corridor of great slate slabs led to nests of rooms in every geometry: five-pointed stars, triangles, perfect cubes, averaging 30 by 30 by 20 feet. Doors 12 feet high and high, windows punctuated walls, floors and ceilings sometimes held green soapstone tiles. Niches occasionally held broken soapstone objects. Some lower corridors were dustless, uncannily clean, like spaces lately swept. The mural system everywhere alternated 3-foot pictorial bands in countersunk relief with equal-width mathematical arabesques. Sunk cartouches inside the arabesques held dot group inscriptions in an unknown script. The artistry was astonishing, delicate detail at monumental scale, with a unique mix of silhouette and sectional perspective. From intact sections, we understood the builders, the same five-pointed beings Lake had found, the Elder Ones, who came to young Earth from the stars, lived under the sea and on land, and possessed science and engineering far beyond human. Murals recorded wars with the Cthulhu spawn, and later the Mi-Go from the Outer Dark. Maps showed continental drift long before men guessed it. Panels explained how the river once flowed beside the range into the ocean, then ate into limestone veins and emptied into a sunless inner sea. Down-pointing tunnels linked the metropolis to that abyss, allowing seasonal migration as the polar cold advanced. Part 6. Down the artery to the abyss. We found the great, inverted hemispherical chamber, about 100 feet in diameter and 50 high, deep within the city, ringed by low archways. One black-arched aperture rose nearly 15 feet, the tunnel to the abyss. Warm air and faint vapor drifted from the mouth. Grotesquely carved jambs framed the descent. The section held a 15 by 15 foot engineered profile, masonry giving way to solid rock, but keeping the same regular proportions. Sparse cartouches in a late, decadent style lined the walls. Grooves cut the floor where the grade steepened. Penguin tracks led outward. Inbound tracks of others led below. The deeper we went, the air grew warmer. Side galleries multiplied into a honeycomb beneath the foothills. Suddenly, the tunnel widened into a natural-looking elliptical cavern, 75 feet long and 50 broad, whose stalactitic roof arched over an abnormally smoothed, dustless floor. The immense side passages were just as polished. Then the wall decoration abruptly changed to a crude, deeply countersunk band, spirals and angles that parodied the Elder Quintile style, sitting below earlier reliefs as if recut by an alien hand. A used torch battery lay on the floor before a panel. Near the rookery, we found 4 headless Elder Ones on the polished mainway, fresh dark green ichor pooling around them, and glistening black slime on bodies and wall-in dot groups, the unmistakable signature of Shoggoths, the formless servitors whose ancient rebellions the murals had shown. A pallid mist curled up from deeper in the tunnel. Then came a wide-ranged musical piping, Tekeli-Li, Tekeli-Li, and we ran. Part 7. Escape and Ascent. We sprinted back through galleries to the inverted dome, into open corridors of the city, and up the spiral ramp inside the ancient cylinder. Breath burning in the thin air, we wound upward past a continuous procession of early, undecayed mural bands, a farewell carved 50 million years ago, and burst into the cold half-light. We stumbled down shattered blocks to the foothills and reached the plain. Part 8. The Violet Rim and the Crossing Back. Halfway up the slope, we paused. Beyond the grotesque skyline of the city, the far western horizon showed a faint, elfin line of needle-violet peaks, so distant they should have vanished in haze, yet precise as a saw edge. The murals had hinted at a shunned range, the highest on Earth, older and stranger than the mountains we had crossed. Kadath in the cold waste, perhaps, the archetype of every forbidden legend. I prayed no one would ever set eyes on those crests again. We took off cleanly, engines steady at about 24,000 feet for the crossing. The wind in the pass piped like a sinister choir. Mist raveled around summits. I held a tight line between the pinnacles while Danforth, released from the controls and strung to braking, kept looking back at the dead city, cube-barnacled peaks, rampart-strewn foothills, and the churning sky. Then he screamed, a raw, tearing sound that nearly cost us the plane. I steadied us and finished the crossing. Danforth wouldn't say what he'd seen, only that it was a mirage, a single demon-clear glimpse among the zenith clouds of what lies behind the Violet Mountains. Part 9. Homeward Flight. We reached the old base the next day, then McMurdo Sound in 2 hops, fighting one last furious shelf wind. Within days, Arkham and Miskatonic broke clear of field ice, turning north while the Victoria Land Mountains twisted the wind into that same wide-ranged piping that now felt like a voice. Less than 2 weeks later, the last hint of polar land was gone astern. On this final journey home, Dyer wrote his final appeal to the university and future expeditions wishing to retrace the team's steps. Part 10. Dyer's formal appeal. In his appeal, he urged, "To those who plan to melt and bore the inner South, heed my warning. Beneath that eon-dead plateau, life and death forged alliances our physics and biology do not recognize. The city we saw is no ruin to reclaim. It is a sealed archive above a sunless sea where the Shoggoths, the formless servitors, have learned to rule. We found their signature on fresh dead. We heard their piping in the dark. We fled before a column of living iridescence that filled a 15-foot tunnel like a subway onrushing from hell. Leave the inner South untouched. Let the elder city sleep under its thin ice. Do not open arteries that lead to the abyss. Do not follow the polished floors that whisper of bulk and hunger. If you melt and bore too deep, you may bring up what ends the world we know. The warning is plain, the evidence complete, and the risk beyond calculation. Turn your zeal elsewhere. Let Antarctica remain what it has been since the Elder Ones themselves retreated, an empty shrine beneath an eternal wind." This concludes At the Mountains of Madness, modern rewrite by Nathan LaCroix.